Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Heartfelt Presence podcast. I'm your host, Peter Adrian, and today we're with Sharon. Do you want to introduce yourself, Sharon? Who are you about, and
Sure.
what's your thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for having me on. It's a delight. I love the Heartfelt Presence site, and it's a delight to be a part of it. So
It's a delight to have you
I'm
on.
excited to I'm excited to talk to you. So my name's Sharon Strimling. I'm a coach and consultant. I live on an island, a small island called Martha's Vineyard, which is off the coast of Massachusetts. And I talk to people from all walks of life and all kinds of places in life, from youth who are quite distressed and may have anxiety or depression or PTSD to leaders of nonprofits or corporations. And it's wonderful work because we get to talk about really something that's so hopeful for people, that helps people see much more possibility for where our minds can go and for how much freedom we can have, despite maybe having learned that we're limited. It really opens up that door to what's possible for a more present and happy and
Hmm.
meaningful life. So
Can
that's
you
what I
kind of
do.
like take us through your journey of
Mm.
seeing possibility and how that's kind of unfolded for you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, this was very personal for me. I had had uh, PTSD, and which I thought was a lifelong condition. I thought that was true. And I had severe anxiety. I would go to the hospital thinking I was having an anxiety attack. I mean, a heart attack, and it was anxiety attacks, and depression. And I was a very earnest, devoted person in sort of the field of getting help and learning about my difficulties and learning how to be more present. And so I did everything. I did a lot of therapy. I did a lot of self-help. And there was so much wisdom in all of it. But I found that I kept digging deeper and deeper, thinking that I would kind of dig into my past and my difficulties with enough effort and devotion that I would kind of pop out the other side and finally feel present and available to think about other people and other things in life and, be in life. So I was putting in my hard work, and that made sense to me with the model that I had grown up with, which is that we work really hard to achieve things in life and to find a good life and a good relationship. So I was working really hard. I was probably doing an hour and a half of therapy 3 times a week
Hmm.
sometimes. I used to joke that I could have bought a house in my early 20s with the money that I was spending on that. And like I said, there was a lot of beauty to it, but it did, at one point, I started to suspect I wasn't going to get to the bottom of the pit, that I'd continue to find painful things in my past. And I'd continue to, if I thought about the trauma, I would continue to experience feelings of pain and fear. And I started to have an inkling that I just felt too like everything was too much about me. I really wanted to be with other people, and everything was too much about me. And it was like well intentioned. I have to heal me to be a good person. So anyway, it was interesting. I had a very intense therapy session one day. I remember in my memory I was hiding behind the couch by the end of it, and
Wow.
yeah. And at the end of it, my therapist, she was so kind and lovely, and she took me out into the woods and had me take my shoes off and my socks off and kind of ground me. I live around a lot of nature before getting in my car to leave because I was really in an altered state.
Hmm.
And the next time I came back to her office, she said, "Sharon, I have news for you." And I said, "Well, what?" And she said, "I've found something I think is more helpful for my clients."
Hmm. What's
Yeah.
that?
and she said, "I'm going to take a year off and learn it, so I can't work with you for this next year."
Hmm.
And I thought, you're giving up your work, your practice, like everything because you think you could help people more. It was really beautiful. It really moved me. So I said, what's that? And she said, if you're free this weekend, there's a woman coming to the island who's going to do a workshop. Tell me if I'm going into too much detail.
No, it's great.
Okay. So, and her name was Annika Hurwitz-Shawn. And at the time she lived in Kennebunkport. She ended up, did I get that right? But anyway, she ended up moving to Martha's Vineyard. But she didn't live here at the time. She came to do a weekend and she had this workshop. And she said, so my therapist said, would you like to, go for the weekend? And I was very young, but I was an entrepreneur. I had quite a busy healing arts practice. And we were doing 50 sessions a day with people with massage and healing arts. And it was the high season. And I said, there's no way I can go away for a weekend, but can I see her for an hour? Can I talk to her for an hour? Would she do that? And she said, yeah, I'll check. So I met with her for an hour. And at the end of the hour, I said, how do I learn this from you? And she said, I do 4-day intensives. And I said, how soon can I come? And I went into my office. I mean, it was, God, when you taste freedom, when you taste, that something really is helpful, it was like, I had no problem going into my office then and saying, I'm going to be gone for 4 days, actually more like a week by the time I got up and back. And so I did that. I left a note on the desk and I said, I'm going to be gone. But what struck me was that everything that she said and what I felt for her was that she was well. And the things she said felt truthful and they felt hopeful. And I just had this sense of being in the presence of somebody who had found something that really, really had landed and really was true. But everything she said made no sense to my analytical mind. She was talking about not having to work so hard. She was talking about not having to dig into the past. She was talking about being able to be present now and that things from the past would heal without my hard work. But I could learn more about how to make that happen. And so I went off and I studied with her and I remember saying to her at the beginning, I need to argue with you. Like, I need to question you because I'm super analytical and I don't believe things just because I'm told them. I really need to see this for myself. So I really need to question you. But here's the thing. I want to believe you. I want to find out you're right. I don't want to believe you. I want to find out this is true. I really want to find out this is true. And I knew that in my heart. And so I questioned her hard. And everything she said landed as like a knowing, like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'd just been caught up in a narrative that I had believed. But she was telling me that there's a natural way that our minds right themselves and take care of themselves. And that instead of micromanaging it, I could kind of get out of its way. And that some of what I had been doing was innocently getting in its way. It's like we have a immune system, and we have, most of us have the capacity to clot, when we get a cut, and we just grew up taking that for granted for the miracle that it is. Like, I can cut my arm, and without doing anything other than listening to science, so washing it, and listening to science, so I put a Band-Aid on it, and staying out of its way, it will heal. Like, really? Like, that's incredible. Like, at one point people didn't know that. And I felt like I had been the kid who didn't know that. And so I was messing with the cut constantly. And I was blowing on it and praying over it and being really good and staying up all night, holding the skin together and reading every book I could to make the cut heal. Yeah. And suddenly I'm finding out, geez, well, why would the skin do that? But the mind wouldn't. Like, it just, for the first time I questioned that. And I thought, what is the stuff I've been doing that's been getting germs in the cut? What's the stuff I've been doing that's been picking at it? And, there is wisdom in what to do. There's things that I do to heal, but I'm not managing the whole process. That's built in. So I can't tell you, I left those 4 days. When it landed, I remember telling Annika, I said, I feel like I've been let out of prison. And what's interesting, I really want to make it clear, I did not think I was in prison before that. I just thought I was having a good life, doing the hard work that you do in life. So I wouldn't have predicted that feeling. But that's how I felt. I felt like I am free. Are you kidding me? I'm free to
Mhm.
be in relationship. I'm free to listen to people and be present without thinking about myself. And I'm still doing something useful. Like my mind is working to help me get over stuff. And oh, I just felt so much freedom. So that was the start of a long journey. That was 25 years ago or so. And I have learned that I continue to learn every day. What's the part where you understand how things work so you wash the cut? Where's the part where you do put a band-aid on? What's the part where you remind yourself not to pick at it? Like there's action involved. There's things to learn. But what's the part that's happening all the time? What's that incredible intelligence that's happening for me all the time? That's happening for everybody I work with all the time. We can't get away from it because as part of nature, we have this incredible design capacity, intelligence to move through really tough stuff. I mean, people have moved through incredible traumas and difficulties since people have been around. You know, that's nothing new. So why do we think we can't handle it now? You know, over the past couple hundred years, why do we think that we're so vulnerable that we can't handle really, really tough stuff? And I continue to have really tough stuff come up because that's life, right? We all do, and so do my clients. But it's different to be able to look at them from my personal experience and know that it's not on them. They can learn and they can grow, but they're supported. They're supported in life, and yeah. So I went on a bit, but it was a powerful introduction to it, and it never left me. And it honestly, it just put me into beyond. I'll just say one more thing, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, go on. It's
you know, beyond finding myself, you know, without PTSD, without anxiety attacks, without depression, beyond that, like as if that's not already good enough. The experience of having conversations that point to that intelligence and that point to that beauty and that resilience. The beauty of that conversation, not for the sake of getting anywhere, but just for what it is, means that in those conversations, we're freed from the, you know, myself and whoever I'm working with, on some level, we're freed from the need to get anywhere. We can just really enjoy the conversation. We can really wonder about something that is so miraculous. We can look at a cut and not take it for granted anymore. You know, it's an incredible exploration beyond just feeling better.
Yeah. It never ceases to amaze me how the mind has a way of reorienting you. And like I'm kind of, you know, in a similar boat. And obviously the details have changed, but I mean, I always thought that in order for change to happen, you needed to put in work. Like it's just, you know, you want to build a house, you got a nice house, well, you gotta, you know, paint and you know, lay the bricks properly and do all that stuff. And if it doesn't look good, well, start over. But it's amazing to see that that's just not the case when it comes to the mind. That, like, you know, I could be going through something tough, in my own experience, and then have this moment of I don't know, what is it, like letting go, almost like just like I'm not, you know, it's not like I'm pushing something away, I'm allowing it. And in that space of just like pure allowing, it's almost like this energy brings you up and brings you back to clarity. It's almost like this sensation of being carried up through clouds into the sky or something like that.
Yes. And if you had suggested that to me, you know, in my old life, I would have, you know, I would have named that belief. You know, I would have named that something kind of pie in the sky, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
in the sky.
Wishful
Did you
thinking,
catch that?
right?
See what I did?
Yeah. Good one.
But now it just looks, it looks absolutely, you know, from my experience, it looks absolutely true. And the thing is, what I love is that it doesn't take long for people to get a sense of that for themselves. It really doesn't. You know, I never want anybody to take my word for things because I didn't take anybody else's word, you know. I had to see it for myself. But so I love just pointing out, you know, well, what happened to your anxiety or what happened to your depression when you saw that car run out into the road? I mean, when you saw that dog run out into the road, you know, what happened when your friend called and said that she just lost her mother? What happened to your depression and anxiety then? Like, where did it go? Right? And there's moments like that. What happened when you were really hungry and you had your first bite of something? Like this very ordinary way that presence, which I thought I had to work for, you know, that lifting up, that lifting out of myself, out of my past, that it pops up all the time for us, but we don't notice it, or we think that that's just us being out of touch with reality. And then we get back to the hard work of what's really happening. But those moments are what's really happening. I heard this, there was at a program in Virginia a few years ago, I forget his name, but he's wonderful. He works with young people with all kinds of diagnoses, and he's a magician. Do you know who I'm talking about? I wonder if you know this person. Well, anyway, he's lovely, and I wish I could credit him and say his name right now, but he works with young people, and he's a magician, and so he'll do magic tricks for them, you know, and at the moment that they're like, what? How did you do that? You know, right? He's like, where's your diagnosis right now? Like and they'll say, yeah, but that's not real life. And they'll say, really? Like maybe just question, just wonder, you know, is it? When are you more present? When you're in your past and your thoughts, you know, and your diagnoses, or when you're absolutely delighted or curious about how the heck I just made that bunny disappear? You know, I don't think he works with bunnies, but
yeah,
you know, and I just thought that was lovely. So when people start to look at just what's right in front of our faces that we just hadn't noticed before, you know, that's so ordinary. Like we take it so for granted that our skin heals, but honestly, there was a time where that would have just been like, you know, or that you can just wash it and not get an infection because you just washed it. That's all you did. You just washed it. That's how you don't get an infection. And people go, what? Right? There wasn't anything there, right? Germs are invisible. I couldn't see them. Well, thought's invisible, and the natural balancing of the mind is invisible, but we can see it play out all the time around us. We can look at our lives, and we can look at nature. We can look at the plants that find their way around the dark building to the sun. You know, we can see that intelligence everywhere, that well-being seeking radar.
Yeah, the automatic well-being device.
Yeah, that one, the GPS. When you were talking about floating up into the sky, I was thinking of a metaphor I really love, which is like a beach ball that you submerge underwater. And when you're holding it down, it will stay underwater. But you don't have to lift it up to the surface of the water. When you take your hands off it, it bobs right back up.
Yeah.
It's, you know, like that's another metaphor I like.
The default energy, the default movement.
Yeah.
The automaticness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always, you know, you obviously heard the term resistance, right? Like,
yes.
And equated to emotional pain, maybe upset. I never really saw that until I was able to see that any time that we're like not feeling that movement of wellness, it's actually because we're resisting by holding on to thought, by holding on to something. And it's like pushing the beach ball down. And it's really quite simple, but it's something that, you know, I suppose we just forget it sometimes.
Well, if I can speak for myself, I forget it all the time. I forget it often. Even 20 something years in, I forget it often, but that's okay. Because it's really compelling. When I'm down, I had moments this morning, I was really concerned about something that was going on in the world, and not a global thing, something in my world. But either way, I get really concerned, and then I remember at some point that I've thought about the very same thing and had a very different feeling at other times. So I can take something like, for me, I can get very upset about things happening in leadership and politics, and I can get really worried, and then I can another day in a different frame of mind look at it and start noticing all the waking up that seems to be happening in people all over the world. More participation, more of a realization it's not going to be handled unless we bring ourselves to it. It doesn't matter which of my thinking is right or wrong. What matters is it changes all the time. And so I'm not experiencing a truth about the world that's verifiable by my thinking. I'm experiencing thought in the moment. I'm experiencing a world of a creative, infinitely creative, variable energy around life, that's going to have me feel concerned some days and pissed off other days and hopeful other days, So I forget that though, and I get upset, and I think that's natural because our senses and our, everything kind of conspires when we think something. One of the things I learned is that when I think something, it's gonna hit me as real. Like that's the innocence of it, but it's also a gift. Like if I didn't go into a movie and get absorbed into it and get lost in my senses, and have the music affect me and have the, I can leave a movie and have like for the next half hour, I can actually worry about the characters. Like I do, I will. Like, what do you think happened? Did they get together in the end? Like, were they okay? And my friends would be like, they don't exist. They're actors. There's no story after the movie ends. Like, right? But I can get lost in it, and it gives me a full experience, a rich experience of the movie. And I kind of see my my day-to-day thinking that way too. I get lost in the movie of, this is a really hard time for humanity. And then I get lost, and then I get swept up by a movie of, I wonder what's coming of this, Oh my gosh, the amount that I'm seeing that people are kind of growing and learning. Wow. So I don't, I want to be clear that there's nothing about the way that I live that's trying to think positive about things. I'm really more interested in allowing that creative experience to happen. I'm really more interested in allowing myself to get swept up. And then at a certain point, if it doesn't feel helpful, the more and more that I learn, the more I wake up to, I remember that things aren't, my thinking isn't who I am. It's not solid. It comes and it goes. It moves all the time. And that I can hang on to it, and I do hang on to it at times, but there's always something fresher and something new to be seen when I do let go. Even if I'm swept up in happy thoughts and excited thoughts, hanging on to them, they get stale, right? But when I realize, and this is one of the things I learned, like these are all metaphors. None of this is actually like verbatim true, but the best way I can describe it is I live in a world of thought, and I live in a river of thought that's just, it's just coming and moving and coming and moving and coming and moving. And sometimes I dam the river because I want to hang on to it or because I'm afraid of what I see, but at some point that the system that I'm not in charge of will wake me up. It will say, you're tired or you're hungry or call a friend, or, I'll be moved to cry, or I will watch a funny movie or something, and the river's moving again.
Mm.
The river's moving again, and it's bringing something new. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah. And, I suppose that one of the, one of the things that we get caught up in is believing that our emotional response is related to the content of whatever pattern happens to be present in the mind in that moment, when in actuality it's responding to the resistance that you're pushing against the river, you're holding on to something. And I think just seeing that is so profound, because most of the time, I mean, for most of my life, I thought that, if I felt bad, it's because I had to engage with something. But, understanding the way this, like, the river of thought works is like, oh, maybe it's not that I have to engage with it. Maybe that I'm blocking something from coming through. And that was like, just the simplicity of that. It can really create a massive change in just your day-to-day life.
I love that. I always had a sense. I mean, I've always been a bit philosopher too, right? So I read, poetry, and I read writings of, really wise people and mystics, and it always points to simplicity. Like I always had a sense that there's truth in simplicity. But I couldn't for the life of me make out how that was possible, because the world looks so complicated, the way that I was looking at it. And it's not, I mean, I wouldn't say that I feel like life is easy. Like, there's too much stuff that can happen in life that can throw me to my knees, and I think always will. But there's a simplicity to just being able to be with that. Like, what if crying, on the floor is okay? What if that's something that moves through us? Because we're always, even though there's this infinite possibility to thought, there's going to be thinking we have that's going to just bring grief, bring fear, bring, all of that. So what if I can fall to the ground and bawl without all the story about it, that means something about me, or worrying about how long it will last, or whether I'm depressed, or whether it'll be that way tomorrow. Because in the absence of all of that, my experience is like crying my heart out, and then there's a very different feeling when that ends.
It reminds me of babies.
But yeah, right? Like, I honestly, I think they're our best teachers. Babies and toddlers, they're our best teachers, and that, the more I through my own power of observation of myself and others, the more I see the wisdom. I see that as the design, I see that as very natural healing. I lost a dog when I was a child, and that dog was like, I had been very lonely, and when I got that dog became my everything. That was my best friend. And he was only about 1.5 or 2 years old when he was hit by a car.
Oh, no.
And that searing pain, I felt it. But I don't recall thinking anything about it. I don't recall thinking how long, maybe I thought how long is this going to last, but certainly not, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Should I still be crying? I still cried probably for years, at least a year or two. I had moments where I would just get overcome with it and cry. But in between, when he wasn't on my mind, when I was engaged in my schoolwork or playing a game, in between, I was every bit as present as I'd always been. Like the joy that I felt in between moments of grief was every bit as rich as it had ever been. I mean, I was awake to life. I was alive to life. I was present to life, and grief would knock me down, and then it would come back again, and it would come back again. And eventually it just probably lasted less and less time and was less and less intense until one day that thinking and that missing and that grieving just had really become a thing of the past. And I didn't, I'm sure I know I cried to one friend. Oh, it was funny. Anyway, I won't go into that story. It was a very funny story. She totally didn't get it. And I ended up laughing. But I started off crying to a friend. Like, that's okay. That's natural. But I didn't have a weekly group that I had to go to talk about that. And I'm not knocking that. Like, that's fine too. But in my childhood experience, I just grieved when I needed to. And then life pulled me back into it, repeatedly until things had healed. And I didn't have I don't recall having any judgment of myself about how fast I should heal, whether I was unhealthy, because a year later I still cried. Like, I just don't remember having any of that. I don't think that happened for me. I don't think I'd learned that yet. But I did go through a really hard time a few years ago. And I'm used to things, I think, sort of inevitably, as you talked about, when we stop fighting thought or holding on to thought, how it takes care of itself. Well, since I learned that, it just seems that hard, difficult moments and happy moments, everything just moves more, right? I get less stuck in one place. Everything just moves more. So things tend to not last very long for me. But I went through something, and I couldn't believe how long it was taking me to heal. And even with everything I know, I had a lot of worry about that. Even with everything I've learned, I still fell into worrying about it. I teach this stuff. How can I still be upset about this, right? How can I still be upset about this? That's what people are funny. I don't know. We make up arbitrary rules about how long things should take, and then we measure ourselves against them, and how intense should our feelings be, and then we measure ourselves against them. But more and more, I do less and less of that. More and more I go, I'm human. I am grumpy sometimes. I'm blissed out sometimes. I am irritable sometimes. I'm frustrated sometimes. I'm anxious sometimes and needy. I'll say things out loud, like to my partner, I'll say, I'm really needy and insecure right now. Right? Like, that would have been embarrassing before I understood this. Now it's like, we both know it's just thought. We both know it's just a temporary experience. And it just rolls off my tongue so lightly that it's not heavy. It's not heavy. I can just show up and be having whatever experience I have. And the beautiful thing is that he knows that I'm okay with it too. He doesn't have to fix it. It's not on him. But he can say, well, what can I do for you? Can I get you a cup of tea? Do you need a hug? Do you want me to reassure you? But boy, I used to think being needy and insecure was really unattractive. Well, the only thing that might be perceived in an uncomfortable way for somebody else is my own discomfort, my own judgment, It's not me. My insecurity isn't me. My thoughts aren't me. They're things that happen. And that's very freeing.
where you were saying something earlier, and it reminded me of a story. What you were saying about your dog.
Oh yeah.
About, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. I think 10 years ago, I was in the military reserves here in Canada, and it was like a couple weeks after my girlfriend and I had broken up, and I was just devastated. That was like the lowest point in my life. And I remember being on the training, you know, and obviously in the military you got to have this image of being someone who's very in control and manly and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, but I was so overcome with sadness from that breakup that pretty much all day, every day, I was holding back tears, just like the whole day. And I remember one day we had to go into ranks. We were, I don't know, we were at the range or something like that, and people were in ranks. And I just like, it's like, you know, when you got to throw up, and there's a point where it just comes through, and it's just like there's no stopping it. I just started bawling. I was just crying, and like some of the guys were nice. They, like, you know, they patted me on the back and stuff like that. But this one guy turned around, and he said something to me, and he said something you're never supposed to say to someone going through a breakup. And I'm not going to say what it is here, but it had something to do with my ex-girlfriend and what she might be doing right now.
God.
And the thing is, though, in that moment that he said that, I laughed. And that laugh was like, it's like there's these dark clouds, and then there's this burst of light. And I'm just like, that's hilarious. And I just like, I was laughing, but I was crying at the same time. But later he apologized to me, and like, I wish I could go back to him and say like, listen, like that was like exactly the joke that I needed in that moment. But it just goes to show you, you know, that like, even when you seem to be caught up in like this cloud of darkness, because I was like, that breakup, you know, I was in a breakup for 6 months. I was devastated.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that there weren't moments of joy, you know? But it's just like when the joy passes, it's like, okay, I'm going to go play with this breakup story again. I'm going to go, you know, cry about these thoughts and stuff like that. I mean, I didn't see it at the time that I was basically doing it to myself, but yeah, it's interesting to look back and see that experience is so much more transient, that our feelings change so quickly, yet we have a tendency to think that we're trapped in feelings or trapped in states of mind and stuff like that.
Right. That's such a powerful story for so many reasons, and including the fact that thing that was said, for whatever reason, just tickled your funny bone and brought the light, you know. It's like when I see, that's the difference between micromanaging my experience and having a sense of the brilliance of nature. Like, if I'm micromanaging my experience, I'm going to draw from everything that I've learned for how to feel better, which in itself is, you know, thank God for more and more that's the necessary agenda. But that I couldn't, you know, I can't plan the things that will let the light in nearly the way this greater intelligence can, you know. Like, I don't have it in my, if I did, it's like, all I can do with what I've learned is draw from what I've already learned. You know, there's nothing new that's going to come along. So if at one point I felt better when I went for a walk, then I'm a one-trick pony. I want to feel better. I think I need to feel better. I'm going to go for a walk. But when I understand that there's a support that's greater, and just that openness itself, you know, if somebody says something that's bonkers, you know, like, I might not shut it out. I might just find it funny.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying you did that on purpose, but it just reminds me of, you know, there's a story, I don't know for sure if it's true, but I heard it and I thought it was it was great and really points to this intelligence that there was a team of city planners trying to figure out a traffic problem and how to fix that in a city. Have you heard this story?
No.
About this?
No.
Well, they're brilliant. They've been doing this their whole lives. They're all PhDs. Well, it occurred to one person. At one point, he had an insight. I believe it was a he, to just go and sit and watch ants, and the way that they move with each other. And from that had a brilliant insight about traffic, right? Like nothing he'd learned in books, but just the capacity to see that intelligence in nature. It's incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
But also, I just wanted to comment on what you said too about the transience, and you kind of went like this, and that was my experience when I first started to learn about thought and how it works, and sort of what I'll call the psychological immune system, that there is something there that balances, that brings me back to the present moment. And when I started to learn, that what I think is going to look real and feel real, and so that's understandable, that I'm convinced. Like, that's not on me. That's just how the mind works. It gives us a rich experience of life. It's just how the mind works. So I don't have to beat myself up for thinking things look really dark. It's just that's the experience, and it's going to look real to me. And it also, just as a side note, like it gave me so much compassion for everybody else, When I look at other people and they're, I don't always feel this, but, I do remember often, well, that person's thinking something and it's looking real to them. They're just like me. So that thing about needing to understand, how can somebody think X? How can they do that? How can somebody do Y? Well, they do it and they think it because thought's bringing it and it's looking real.
Yeah, it looks real.
It's such an equalizer.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that wasn't a tangent, but can you tell I like talking about this stuff?
The thing is, I don't even realize when we go on oh my God, it's snowing right now.
Oh.
Anyway.
Where are you in Canada?
I'm actually, I am Canadian, but I'm living in the UK right now.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, but it's not supposed to be snowing in April here, I don't think.
I love snow. I love snow.
That's cool. Anyway, yeah, I don't really know when tangents happen. I feel like...
What's the tangent and what's the point?
Yeah, my whole life is a tangent, I feel.
That's great. That's great. That's right. That's so right. Yeah, it's my memory tracking. Where was I going? Yeah. Okay. Well, where I was going was, this was really helpful to me this past year. I realized that even though I said like that this difficult period stretched on longer than I was expecting, and I had thinking about it. I had a lot of thinking about it. But I still, if I felt good one night, I'd still go out dancing and have a blast. If someone called me needing support, the moment I forgot about myself, I was with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all of that still happened, whereas before I kind of understood that was okay, I would have thought I should use that feeling good moment to look at what happened yesterday, to find the next person to fix it. Right. I had to worry about it, to I should use that moment of being okay to make sure that feeling never comes back. Right. Mm-hmm. So different. So some people say, when they learn about thought and how it works and the human experience more and kind of see it more clearly, that their lows become more graceful. And I've started saying, nah, not for me. I have lows that don't look graceful at all. But here's the thing. Wherever my thinking goes, I'm going to feel that. So wherever I'm taken in this creative experience of life, and I'm not I don't see in any way that I'm in control of what thoughts are coming in. I mean, they're coming in fast and furious. Mm-hmm. So I feel down, which I used to try to figure out, right? So I'm down here trying to figure it out, which is inevitably mucking around in the mud and holding it in place, right? Trying to figure it out through my intellect, trying to make sense of something that's really quite profound. quite beyond my analytical mind to figure out and muck around there. And then if I started to feel better, I would use that to, like I said, to work on it. So I'd go back into the muck. And then I might start to feel better, but I'd worry it would come back tomorrow. So I'd go back into the muck. And then I'd wonder if it was going to affect my work. So I'd go back into the muck. Right? Like, can you see this? Yeah. And then I'd think maybe I was depressed because I'd been in the muck a really long time. And, chemically, there are things that happen by that point, but that's a whole other topic. Well, now I might feel horrible. And then when I wake up, it's like waking up from a nightmare. I might have a little bit of a nightmare hangover for a little bit, right? Like, that was an awful nightmare. Let me tell you about it. Let me just feel like awful. But at some point, I'm not immediately working on my nightmare. I'm not worried it's going to necessarily happen the next day. Mm-hmm. I mean, that could happen for people, but for me, that's not a scary thing, right? And so I'm awake now. Well, that's kind of what it's like for me now. Like, I'm just awake now. Like, yeah, I might have had some really, really ugly, dark thoughts yesterday, or an hour ago. Mm-hmm. But now I'm awake. I'm present. Okay, bring it on. Bring on life. Yeah. Bring on life. Let me be here for what's happening now. And that doesn't mean that in that moment, the intelligence of life doesn't say, hey, you might want to schedule a call to get a little support because you've had some down moments. But it's a different feeling. It's like, yeah, I might look into that. But then it's just a phone call or a to-do. But I'm back in life. And so now I kind of look more like this, right? And I won't even make this area better. I won't even do that. I won't even say this is the place to be. I'll just say that I'm glad that I experienced the full dimension of life. I'm glad that I can be alive to it and present to it.
A friend of mine once said, when I was, just pointing to that freedom that we have, he said, I remember he painted a circle too. He said, you have the right to all 360 degrees of experience. That's awesome.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I think it might help to clarify one thing. Should I go on?
Yeah, go for it.
I was just thinking, it just occurred to me that while I say that I am grateful for the full experience of life, I truly am. I mean, I truly am. But when I'm down here, I might not. That's not a moment that I'm usually aware of it. Mm. I'm not usually grateful to be grieving at the moment that I'm grieving, right? But I do notice what it adds to my life. I do notice that there's a way that it feels like a nicer place to be, to have a certain kind of ground in humility from being in the mud. It feels like a nicer place to be. It feels like a more connected place to be. And I feel that really helps me in relationship with other people, to know that I can feel that awful. And I don't have to worry about feeling grateful when I'm down there. It doesn't matter. I'm in the nightmare and it's going to play out how it plays out. I remember I have a friend she was suddenly disabled. She's since come back, but she had about 2 years, a good chunk of which if she moved at all, she'd get horribly dizzy. So she's a tremendous athlete, used to being outdoors and just incredible athlete. And she's now in this situation where she can't read or watch TV or anything. She has to sit and just, she can't have anybody get too close to her, too far away. And it went on for ages. And I remember her saying to me, I should be grateful. I have this loving family supporting me and friends like you, and I should be grateful. And it really hit me in my heart how difficult it was that she would have not, I feel great, like gratitude has come to me, like that's lovely, but that it's like there's something wrong with her, that she didn't feel grateful. That, and I just looked at her and I said, gratitude isn't a doing that I'm proud of. It's a grace that I sometimes receive. It sometimes just comes, and I can be grateful that I feel grateful, but it's not I said, nobody's better than you that they're grateful right now. Nobody in the world is better than you ever. You're having your experience and you're scared, and I get it. I think we can, we can have so much thinking about what we're supposed to be like, and, how graceful we're supposed to be and how compassionate we're supposed to be all the time. We just got a lot of stories. I had a lot of stories. And I see, the more that I understand the nature of thought, that I'm not controlling what comes in, The more acceptance, the more forgiveness, it's just built into life. It's not a doing. The more gratitude just pops out.
Yeah.
It's not a doing. It's not a doing. It's not something to be proud of. Resilience isn't a thing to be proud of. When I was looking not very resilient, a couple of years ago, like that wasn't something to be ashamed of. When I was having horrible thoughts, it wasn't something to be ashamed of. And what I love is when other people, understand how we work as human beings, how we, understand that innocence. There's a way that they too can be present with me, when I'm struggling, and I too can be present with other people when they're struggling. And there's nothing that has to change. We can just be in a space of connection and presence and love, and that in itself is just infused with something quite beautiful.
I definitely feel that, like, true gratitude is a natural process. It's like like when the mind quiets, then we just naturally find ourselves in a feeling of gratitude.
Yeah.
And you can't force yourself there. You can't make it happen.
Yeah.
You just can appreciate it when it does happen, right?
Yeah, that's been my experience. I love the metaphor of the clear pond, and it gets mucked up. You throw a rock in it and the mud comes to the surface. And I used to scuba dive. I haven't in a while, but I would go into caves, pretty deep caves. And I was in some places, I was lucky enough to be under there with a cave explorer. So I was in places probably nobody else had ever been. And if you stirred up, with your flippers, if you stirred up the silt that had been settling, the water was as clear as the air, being in these caves, because there was no life. There's no plants. There's no life down there. There's no light. We're wearing headlamps. So clear water. And if you stir up that silt, it's really light, and it will linger in the water. And if you try to flail around to make it clear or do this, right, you're just going to stir up more silt. So we were careful. We were careful not to stir up too much silt, because then you don't know where you're going. You're blinded. Now, the advantage we have in life is we don't have an oxygen tank that runs out at some point, right? Actually we do. It runs out at some point, in this form, but we don't have that. but I didn't have that underwater. So there was a certain time limit. So we couldn't stir up the silt. But in life, you can stir up the silt because eventually it's going to drop back down. And so trying to fish for gratitude when I'm in a nightmare, it's like, let me try to push the silt back down. And what am I doing? I'm just stirring more up. Our kids have snow globes and they shake it and they know that they can't make those little flakes fall. They set the globe down. Well, there's something in life called gravity, and that gravity is working on its own without you, doing a way better job than you can do. Right? and so mucking around looking for gratitude, looking to feel what you're not feeling when there's a system already in place. There's a system already in place. And this is what I didn't know, 30 years ago. This is what I didn't know. And it doesn't always work as fast as we want. Sometimes the silt takes a while. And it's not that we don't do anything. We learn helpful things to navigate. But it's based on an understanding of what's going on. It's not based on a mythology that I can actually, I can do a better job with my mind than that natural intelligence can do. I'm under no illusion at this point that I can direct that better than nature. So
I feel like that's it's great that you had that experience, because that's such a perfect metaphor, and only you're allowed to use it, because most people haven't been cave diving like me. But I will use it anyway from now on.
You are more than welcome to steal that. I knew a person who I steal people's metaphors all the time.
But I think that's a great metaphor too, because the idea of being in a cave is like you don't know your way out. And
right.
I feel like it's a great metaphor for seeing, and how seeing is like this ability that is almost miraculous, but so ordinary, where when the mind is clear, it's just like I don't want to use the word solutions, but the way becomes so obvious. And I'm imagining being in a cave, and you're stirring up all the silt that's everywhere, you can't see anything, and then it begins to settle, and then it's clear, and there's like the very obvious hole where like you need to go to get out of the cave, kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting, because these what I think you and I and other people who are sharing, speaking about this, I think what we see looks like miracles, we see them all the time. But what's the miracle of just your vision going clear, right? Like it looks hard to believe, right? Like I like that, I think about, a dark room with where you're moving, maybe your garage, and it's full of furniture and it's full of boxes, and you can't get to the light switch. So you work really hard and you move really slowly, and you put your toe out and you put your finger out, and you try not to bump yourself, and you get through the garage, right? And it's a lot of work, and you can probably find your way through the garage, right? Being really careful and working really hard. And it takes a while, or you turn the switch on, the light switch on, and it's a cinch to walk through.
Yeah.
And you reminded me that, so I did stir up the silt in a cave one time, and there was a hole that big, right? So it was hard to move through it without stirring up the silt. It was funny when you said that. And I did stir it up. And my friend who was ahead of me had already gone through, and I was blind. I couldn't see. And I did have an oxygen tank that would run out, right?
Which is on.
I think we sometimes think that in life. We have an oxygen tank that like if I'm not feeling better in a day, the sky is going to fall in, right? But it's not like that. But underwater it was. And what happened, I immediately knew, be still, be still. He's going to realize I'm not with him. I didn't have to search my memory bank. I'd never been in that situation before. I just knew, be still. And, it was probably a long 20 seconds, but eventually I felt him, grab me and pull me forward. And he could be, there's no rights or wrongs. He could be a beautiful meditation. He could be a friend who's awake and can gently say, hey, you're just having a bad dream. We're here. I'm here. He could, and metaphorically, that hand reaching to me could be anything from wisdom. It could be a bad joke from a guy, and
Yeah, true.
It could be anything. But I think, you see this intelligence all the time when people are in life-threatening situations where their minds get really quiet. Why does that happen? Because it's like you said, when the mind quiets down, there's so many options. When the windshield is clear, you can drive. Mm-hmm. When the scratched up glasses come off, you can see. Well, instead of thinking my thoughts are real now, I think they're scratches.
Yeah.
And when that comes off, it's like, it looks like a miracle. But how do I not have PTSD anymore? How do I not go to the hospital with anxiety attacks anymore? How do I not identify as having depression, even though I have times where I look like I'm feeling awful for a while? Because I know I'm wearing scratched up glasses. I know that it's not me, and I know it's scratched up glasses. It's not the end of the world. It's different. It's just different.
There's definitely an element of, I sometimes think of this as a Scooby-Doo kind of, like in Scooby-Doo when there's this big ghost and it's like scaring everyone, and it's like, you're just this, it's like a person on with a little screen, like some little guy with a thing. They pull the cover off, and it's like, you found me. What's that term? If it wasn't, I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for you meddling kids. But
That's right. Oh my gosh.
But it's like how many times does Shaggy, the main character in Scooby-Doo, go through these these seeming ghosts and haunted houses before he like picks up on the trend that they're all just somebody pretending to be something they're not, right? And it's like, how many times do we need to fall for the illusion that we create using thought that feels real and looks real before we begin to pick up on the scent that it's just a teeny tiny little thought looking super big and scary.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I remember I was really afraid of somebody. I haven't thought about this in decades. I was really afraid of somebody. I think in my early 20s before I learned this. But somebody said something to me one time like, he's not like human size. Like when you talk about him, he's like giant size, right? And I was like, oh my God, you're right. That's the power of thought. In my mind, that metaphorically speaking, I didn't think he was a giant, but, this person that I didn't even know well, but I was terrified around, I had created something out of him. Mm-hmm. And the trick is we're creating something out of everybody anyway, even normal size. Yeah. We can start to catch on to that anyway, which gives us variability, which means that when I see people I love and I've known them for decades, that I can actually remember to see them fresh. I can remember that everything I've thought about them in the past will only keep me at some distance from them. Mm. It will only like, we think about relationships as like somehow set in stone to some extent. This person is just the way they are. They're not going to change, or they might change, but we see them as a static, right? Like a thing, without realizing that's being created through perception every moment. And that person will actually disappear. I can be right in front of somebody who will disappear from me when I start thinking about something else anyway. They're only there and as they seem through my senses and what I make of them.
Yeah.
And the power of thought, like that's the only way they even exist for me. And then even people that I'm close to and love become more interesting. What will I see new? How will they live today? Yeah.
One of
But
the
yeah,
I heard this once, and
yeah,
something clicked in me, but it's as if, okay, the people in our life, if you were to take let's say a friend of yours, right, and and think about them right now. Like, I'm not saying you do this, but hypothetically, if you're to do that, there's like an image of them, of their personality, of their, persona, of their being.
yes,
And when they walk through the door, it's almost as if they walk outside of your mind and meet you in the flesh almost. And
mm,
that's just because
yeah,
when we see people, we immediate like the mind automatically pushes that image on top of them.
yeah,
You know? It's like, oh, I created this character, and then their face walks in, and I'm looking at the character I made, you know?
yeah, totally.
And so you have to kind of see that that's happening in order to see what's behind it. But it's so convincing and it's so real. It's like the characters we make up in our head almost look like they're actually alive
Yeah.
when there's actually another being beyond the image that we make of people.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's so great. And it's like your question, like how many times does the cloth come back, in Scooby Doo? Like how many times, like as far as I can see, forever, forever, forever,
Yeah.
forever. It's just part of how it works, you know. Like in a nice way too. Like right now, I feel like I'm in a room with you, right?
Mhm.
Like the reality is, I'm talking to a piece of metal, like in front of me, right? Like in reality, there's no conversation happening, but I forget that the screen goes away, and
Mhm.
it's like I'm in a room with you. Like that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. And so I guess I don't want the illusion to go away. I mean, when I'm down, I do, but it's temporary. Then I come to my senses. Then I come back to my senses and I go, you know what? It's the way I can like love moss, and, you know, put my face in my hands in my dog's fur and breathe it in and,
Yeah.
like get lost in puppy world. It's a beautiful thing, but it does come with pain. I mean, life, like that's just, I just don't, I think it took me a while to realize, because sometimes, when you sort of start seeing through thought, you just think, oh my God, I'm going to be present all the time. And this is, I'm free from like this. I mean, there's so much joy in being free from so many limitations. And, maybe I won't hurt again. Yeah, it's not been my experience. But yeah, but wow, the I've always been like, I love nature. Well, you don't know that, but now you know. Now you know. I love nature. And I love all the weather. People have probably used that metaphor before on your program, but I love the weather. When people would say like, "Oh, it's going to be an awful day today," I would say, "Well, what exactly does awful mean?"
Mhm.
Right? Oh, it's going to rain all day. I'll be like, "Awesome, I'm getting a book."
Yeah.
I love weather, and it's just a lot nicer to sort of hold that kind of space for the weather of the mind, for my different states, for things that come and go, and you know,
Mhm.
and to see that in others and not have to change them. And yeah, it's cool. It's cool stuff. It's cool stuff.
There's beauty in everything if we're willing to look for it.
Yeah. 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 I'm aware of, it was only a few weeks ago that I saw beauty in something that hadn't seemed beautiful for me for a long time. You know what I mean? Like you know, but it was like almost like when I first met Annika. it's that willingness. It's like, it doesn't look like there's any beauty in this. It doesn't look like
Hmm.
there's a gift in this. This is, this knocked me to my knees. It doesn't look at all like there's any beauty in it. But I did have a sneaking suspicion something was coming out of it. I didn't know what. And then it hit me, but it just took a while, but it hit me and I was like, oh my God, this too. Oh my God, this too. Yeah. And, it was like what I said to Annika, like, I want to see it. I'm not going to force myself to. I'm not going to beat myself up that I haven't yet.
Hmm.
But boy, will I be excited to see what I haven't seen yet. Oh boy, I
Yeah.
love finding out that I'm wrong about stuff that's painful. I always think,
Mhm.
why would I want to be right about something that's painful? Let me be wrong.
I
Please let me
remember
be wrong.
the thing is, so when I first started having these kinds of profound insights into the nature of thought and how we're living in a thought created reality and there's wisdom in us and all this kind of fun stuff. The first thing I did was try to make everyone around me understand that, and which is
Yes.
which is silly, but I
Yeah.
mean forgivable because we just kind of want to wake people up to
Oh,
this.
yeah.
Um, and you know, obviously, people responded with uh, like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Yeah.
and um, it
What's
wasn't
wrong with me
until I
that you
had,
want to change me?
yeah, um, it wasn't until I had my one of my first coaching sessions that that's like, I was just talking about a little bit about thought, and they said something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they said something, and um, and I was like, you know what, like that doesn't really look true to me. And I was expecting like this kind of because it was a thing that life would be better without. Let's say,
Okay.
like if
Hmm.
I told you that there was $1 million outside, and
Yeah.
you'd probably be like, no, there's not. But you know, um, but like in that, well, let me just gather my thoughts here. In that moment, she said, "How?" Like, she was like
Ah,
curious. She was like, how could it be that I'm wrong? Because that would be awesome, right? So I
yeah.
wish I remember what it was about, but it was one of these things, and then there's just this opportunity for me to point her into a new direction,
Yeah.
and it was beautiful, and like she experienced some pretty profound stuff. But it is
Mm,
that the willingness, it's
yeah.
like the the desire, to want to see something new, to be curious. I think
Yes.
that's a really, really beautiful thing.
Yes. And it's funny because I didn't know that curiosity, we talk about when the mind settles, there's like this intelligence, there's, we haven't talked about it, but in my experience, when the mind settles, there's a sense of well-being, there's a sense of presence, there's, some people say like colors look brighter, we're just more in the room, there's a
Hmm.
sense of connection. When my mind settled, people try really hard to get connection. I was trained as a hypnotherapist, and there's things you do to get into rapport and create connection. It was
Yeah,
always an
yeah.
additive. Like if I you know if I do these things or establish a common experience or relate to somebody or sound back to them or do the same posture, there'll be this connection.
Hmm.
And same with compassion. Like there will be this we have to learn compassion. Let's teach our children compassion. Well, my experience is when the mind settles, that's all there. That's all there. That's not additive. It's subtractive. It's like there's just the clearing. When the scratch glasses come off,
Hmm.
reality is full of these beautiful feelings. That's my experience.
Hmm.
But I didn't know that curiosity was in there. I hadn't seen that. And I always thought, I'm not curious enough. And that would happen to me a lot. Like I'd be talking to somebody and I'd start thinking I knew where they were going. Let me kind of finish your sentence for you, or
Hmm.
right. And then at one point when my mind settled, I just got really curious, and I realized, oh my gosh, I think that's there too. I don't have to, I started thinking like I have to try to be more curious. Well, no, I don't have to try to be curious. I don't have to try to be compassionate. I don't have to try to be in connection. I don't have to do any of that. In fact, the less I do, the less I'm stirring up the silt,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
right? The more I'm willing to just like see that I'm having a thought experience and there's silt, and know that life will bring me back into presence. And then when it does, those things are all just already there.
Yeah.
That was really cool. But, it reminds me of what you were talking about with resistance. And it's an interesting word because I get that the activity of that happens, the fighting of the mind happens. But it's so apparent to me that that the compass is towards peace. The inner
Hmm.
compass is always really towards peace. And that the way I see it, it's kind of like me grilling Annika the first few days. Like that could look like resistance, but really I wanted the peace.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
just had to satisfy the intellect, right? I had to
Yeah.
know that it made sense. I had to know that it made sense on
Hmm.
some level. And I think for me, when I could be seen as holding thought in place or being resistant to thought, when that could be the apparent reality, what's happening is I just I just think I'm in a reality that requires me to go in that direction to be better.
Hmm.
I'm still trying to get to peace. I'm just misguided. I'm just thinking it's in that direction. I'm thinking it's through my intellect. I'm thinking it's through me mucking around
Hmm.
in the silty water, you know. Um yeah. I don't know where I was going with that. I have no idea where I was going with that. Hmm.
It makes me think of one of my favorite kind of metaphors for this is paramedics. It's like you're in a car accident
Yeah.
and the paramedics come, right, and like it's like don't move, you know, we got you.
Yeah.
And it's like okay, they take your head, they go like that, they tuck your arms in, they roll you onto a little spine board, and then they wheel you in the ambulance. And it's like you don't do anything,
Yeah.
you know, you just kind of sit back and watch everything kind of play out and eventually settle down.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a beautiful story. I think it's Dr. Bill Pettit. Um, I hope I credit this properly. But anyway, somebody wonderful. And as I recall the story, which of course I could get that wrong too, but as I recall the story, there was he witnessed somebody get in an accident, and this person was frightened, and 911 had been called, and he or whoever it was went up to this person and said, you can tell I've never told this story before, so I better get my details right before next time. And said, I just want you to know the healing's already begun.
Hmm.
Like I just got goosebumps everywhere, right? Like the healings are like not you'll be okay necessarily, not don't worry. Just a true fact. You were in an accident. The healing's already begun.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like a load off you, hey?
Thank God. Thank God the healing's already begun. And the healing has already begun. It's already, the way I see it, it's already in action all the time. Sometimes things get the best of us, sometimes we die of cancer, but all along the way there's healing mechanisms in place that are doing their best. It's not that they're not there.
Hmm.
It's not that they're not there.
Yeah.
And I think one of my favorite things in doing this work is speaking to parents before I ever talk to the child, because parents are so scared. And I've been through it. I don't have children, but I've been through it in life with families and with um and the fear is so there in parents when kids struggle. And I think it's because they don't have any sense of how powerful that innate healing is. And I can have an half hour, an hour conversation with a parent, and you just see like, you just see that, I never say somebody's going to be okay, or, I don't predict the future or promise things. I just point things out to people that make sense to them, and that are inherently, innately so comforting, and, so hopeful and so supported. I thought I was broken. We think other people are broken. Oh, I know where I was going before. We try to change people when we see this. I went through the same thing. I think everybody I know who, it's like when you read a great book, you want someone else to read it. Well, when you find freedom from terrible pain, you want to be able to share that. Like, that's so beautiful. And it's so beautiful. It's just we don't see how our own thinking about the other person's pain being wrong is also a thing happening, right? Don't see how we make that up, and we try to fix somebody. What we're telling them is they're broken. That's the opposite of what I want to do. That's the opposite of what I want to see. And when I first came across this, and I did a professional training like 23 years ago, and we went around in a circle to say why we were in the room. And the obvious answer is to help people. But when it got to me, I said, I want to know how I don't have to help people. I knew that if I saw that, I just knew that was the first step. I didn't know what would happen, but I knew there was freedom in that. I knew that felt like truth. And I still get caught up in wanting to, to devote my life to this. I love, but I don't see it as helping people. I just see it as like, you see somebody having a nightmare, and you want to just kind of, Sidney Banks, who had the original experience that brought this whole world of understanding. He would say, something like, we have the best jobs in the world. We get to walk around and gently shake people on the shoulders, and wake them up. I might have butchered that quote, but that something image, it's so natural, it's so natural, but it's from a place of knowing that all we're doing is helping people wake up to who they already are. They're not broken. We're not fixing them. And that's what makes this so different than what I thought, before I, on minute one of that training, so long ago. You know what I mean? So.
It's interesting. When I first, started seeing all this, I was working as a plumber, and it was like immediately when it happened, I was like, I can't be a plumber. Yeah. I was like, this is just too important to share with people. I'm like, imagine we just accidentally stumbled upon this button that cures world hunger, and it's it's just everyone look at this kind of thing. It's like I'm not doing anything else,
Yeah, me too. Well, actually, at first I think the process I needed to go through was more of the former part, not needing to share, needing to see that. And it took a while, but at a certain point it became obvious. There's nothing more I want to bring to the world than this. Nothing, nothing more, nothing more. And that's beautiful. We're lucky we get to do that.
Yeah.
We're lucky we get to do that. And you know what? The truth is that it's like you say, everybody that, the young people I work with, they start sharing it with their friends. The people in prison that I was in a program with just at one point, as soon as it hits them, they want to help not only the other people in prison, but the guards. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
It's nice.
Yeah. Oh, good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good opportunity for anyone listening who wants to, for free, explore more in this direction. You can head on over to heartfeltpresence.org, and there's a Zoom room where you can actually find Sharon and she'll speak to you.
And so many other amazing practitioners.
24/7.
24/7.
Do you want to, how can people find you?
Oh, I have a website. Well, first of all, on Heartfelt Presence, it's just such an incredible resource. And unlike me, it goes 24/7. I do not. But if people want to find me directly, I have a website. It's SharonStrimling.com. So that's, I don't know if my name's spelled out there, but I can spell it. SharonStrim, as in Mary, Ling.com. And on Facebook as well, Sharon Strimling Coaching and Consulting. So delighted to be there for anybody who wants to carry on this conversation and say, what are you talking about? Are you kidding me? And I'll go, well, I don't know. See for yourself.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for reaching out and coming on. It's been awesome having you here. I've had a blast.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much. I've loved talking to you. And thank you for everything you're doing to support this incredible service.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Just such a gift to the world. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. I don't know really how
enjoy
to
the snow. What's
there
up?
Enjoy
the snow.
What's the weather where you are?
It's sunny and warming up. I can feel spring in the air. It's not snow, but it's not summer yet.
All right. Well, enjoy the spring, I guess, right?
Yeah.
That's
I
cool.
love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's really been a pleasure.